Everybody to the Sales EU Twitter chat and Google Hangout. This is our 31st Google Hangout. We, of course, bring you the latest and greatest and best practice in the sales arena. And today's special guest, we have David Brock, the infamous, the famous David Brock of Partners in Excellence blog. And we also have my boss, so be kind, Nikolaus Kimla.
Good morning.
Okay, so if you want to get on the chat, our chat is #SalesEU. That's where we're going to be talking about today's topic, which is, of course, the salespeople as CEOs, or as Nikolaus, my boss, terms this, the salespreneur type approach to business. Now, this is something which I think both of you are fairly aligned on, so I'll be quite interested to see where your differences are along this and how your approach to the market for this particular topic goes as well. Now, David, let's start with yourself. Tell me a bit about yourself. Let's jump in. Give me some background.
Oh, great. Well, thanks. Well, Richard, first, thanks to all of you at Pipeliner for inviting me to be part of this. I really appreciate it. Just briefly, my name's Dave Brock. I run a company called Partners in Excellence. There are about 15 of us scattered throughout the world. What we do is we really help primarily large companies think about business strategy issues and go-to-market issues. So anything from, how do we best reach our customers, how do we best communicate with them, and how do we best develop a relationship and grow our sales with them. So I'll stop there as kind of a brief introduction, and you can visit my sites and get bios longer than you ever cared to read.
Absolutely, I have to say that I retweet and share your information on a regular basis. Your website is partnersinexcellenceblog.com, which is a great site to go to. I actually have that in my Feedly, so I see that on every time I go into it, because there is good content which is worth sharing on there. Now, Nikolaus, obviously I know your background intimately, but do you want to give our audience a little background about yourself, where you started from?
Well, first of all, I enjoyed it today. It's very much interesting because we have right now our London, our Vienna, Los Angeles, our Southern California. I think isn't that fun to do something like this? On the other hand, going to the background, when we started Pipeliner, we were clear in our approach that sales in itself needs a change. The systems they're out there. When we interviewed a lot, hundreds of salespeople were saying CRM sucks. And I said, come on guys, would you drive a car that after 1-2 days you would say, my goodness, this car sucks really. The wheels are not really fine, the air condition is not good, the seats are not very comfortable, and you would say, my goodness, this car sucks. What do? You're changing the car. So why people cannot change CRM systems? Because they basically believe all the CRM systems sucks equally. And so for that reason they say there is no big difference to change from one vendor to another vendor. And all of that is because the approach they have taken for sales was on the wrong side. And so this is where we said, okay, when we fundamentally changing something, we have to do it really from the perspective of a salesperson. And salesperson are coming into account because we neglected their identity. Salespeople are not bookkeepers. This doesn't speak against the bookkeeper. So bookkeepers are very important people, but they have a different agenda in the company. They have a different objective, what they have to achieve. And a salesperson was once a person who has freedom, who has a lot of intuitive approaches, and turned out to be a data clerk, a data entry person. And this is what salespeople hate to do. They don't want to do that, and they don't want to be controlled, but they want to be led. But the systems that are out there in the world, we realized, okay, are controlling tools. And so for that reason, it started that the salespeople started to think, oh gosh, and then they became what they never should be. They became not any longer this entrepreneurial approach that the salesperson has. Because you see, a real salesperson sees always an opportunity when nobody else sees one. He says, wow, with this guy I can make business. Or in this company, I have probably another portion of selling them another solution. And so this is what you see that no one else sees. And the whole systems, the CRM industry and everything, put the salesperson in someone to do hundreds of phone calls on the inside sales, or just running out on the field sales and just neglecting and putting all the data in. And then it started to become fear. I give all the data in, I am controlled only, I become a machine. And the real thing what sales is, the beautiful thing of sales was again, and so we've started this adventure, and I'm happy that so many people joining us. I'm very thankful. Thanks again for everyone who is contributing with us, because I think we're changing here something for a whole industry.
Excellent. I think you're absolutely correct there. I think half the time the problem with CRM systems is they're simply designed by the wrong people. They're not designed by salespeople. And of course, if the designers don't have sales training, how are they going to know what works for sales? Okay, we'll move on to our first question. So we're talking about the entrepreneurial spirit which is within sales. So what's the connection between entrepreneurship and sales? David, do you want to go for the question first?
Yeah, and what I'll do, maybe I'll flash back into kind of my background. I started my career at IBM selling mainframe computers in New York City. And at the time I entered IBM, it was really kind of interesting. They gave me a mentality that ended up being tremendously entrepreneurial. And you can think of, for a large corporation like IBM being an entrepreneurial salesperson, but they instilled in me that kind of the mentality that it was my God-given right to 100% share of account and 100% share of customer. And so if you think about that, that's very entrepreneurial. All the startups I tend to work with have kind of the same mentality. They want to go out and conquer the world. They have an idea and a passion that really drives them, and they really want to conquer the world and contribute, through their technology or through their businesses and through their ideas to help grow people and grow companies and organizations. So I started my career with kind of the same mentality. They said, it's your right to 100% share of customer, your right to 100% share of territory, but you got to figure it out. And that's where the entrepreneurial piece really comes in, is now you got to say, just like an entrepreneur, you got to start looking at your accounts, you got to start looking at your territories and say, how do I achieve that goal? How do I achieve 100%? What are the things that I need to do? What are the customers I need to focus on? What are the things I need to offer them? How do I mobilize an entire team of resources that may be within my own company or with partners or other people to help me achieve those goals? So, you start with that, and it just is so precisely aligned to entrepreneurship, and, that's why I think sales is probably one of the best careers in the world to go into if you have that kind of spirit.
I like it. This is so. This is so the opposite of the reality what we are talking here. But I like it. Why? Because I am sometimes standing in front of a lot of people and talking. And the last time I was in front of a big crowd, and so basically at the end I always make a question to the audience, and I just ask them, from the young people, who wants, if you're at the university or wherever you go, I ask, who wants to be a lawyer? Yeah, it's a decent profession. The hands are raising up, and then I'm asking, who wants to be in finance? Yeah, in classical, a broker, investment banker, venture capitalist, whatever. The hands going up. Who wants to be in marketing? Well, more on the ladies' side, and others are. And then at the end, I always ask, who wants to be a sales manager? Guess how many percentage are raising their hands?
Probably none. I think that's a basic intelligence test, maybe. But
the interesting thing, it's less than 2%. But when you're taking an account of the workforce around the world, we did an investigation. At the end of the day, 25% of the working population is ending up in a sales-related job. So nobody wants to be in sales, but ending up, from 4 people, 1 is in sales. Isn't that interesting?
Well, and it's really interesting too. I mean, you brought up the topic of kind of universities and everything. I think it's the Sales Education Foundation did some research, and I think I may have the number off by just a little bit, but I think 72% of people's first jobs out of a college or university is a sales job.
Yeah. But there kicks in the problem, because you see, in the mindset of the people, and this is what I said in a presentation recently, sales still is not a profession. And this is even it gets complex every day a little bit more. The complexity is not less. People are thinking and making us and saying, no, it's getting, even to the network community, what we will talk a little bit later, it's getting more and more complex. That means it needs more education. People think they can drop out of the college and immediately in a sales job. Yeah, and so this is not working. Yeah, and this is why it's so hard. Give me one company who is really growing, who has not one demand in many areas, but the one big demand is finding good salespeople. This is a profession. Everyone is looking around. Everyone is looking around.
Well, I think one of the things, if we start reversing this a little bit, and let's look at it a little bit from the entrepreneur side and then bridge it into the sales side, and I happen to be doing some work right now. I have a dream possibly to write a book on this, but I'm actually doing a number of interviews of some very, very powerful people. And I've developed some. When you look at entrepreneurs and you look at great business leaders, I notice kind of 2 traits. One is they're obsessive learners, and they're relentless in executing. And they combine those things together and kind of rapidly iterate. And they're constantly learning. They're constantly trying to figure things out and how to get better. So they experiment in executing something, and they may get their teeth kicked in, but they learn from that and they pick up some other knowledge. They learn by talking to other people. When they walk into a room, they're the best prepared people in the room. They've researched who they're talking to. They've researched what's in it for them, what they're trying to get. I sit in on a lot of VC kind of funding types of things, and you get the good entrepreneurs who really are focused. They're coming in and saying, not just here's how wonderful my product is, but they've researched the company. They know the VCs. They know what they invest in. They know what they're looking for.
Correct.
They're prepared to answer every question. So you think of that kind of obsessiveness and relentlessness, and you say, and you then start looking at high-performing salespeople, and you start seeing the very same thing. You see the very best performers are out there trying to figure it out. They're trying to really take all the training that they've had, all the tools and systems that they've had, but they're out there figuring it out and saying, what can I do? How do I connect with this customer? So I see this kind of huge connection between that, and again, that combination I see is kind of this obsessive learning and just never giving up.
Yeah, no, this is very good what you say. I underline that wholeheartedly. For that reason, I would even add a little bit. It's the principles of the entrepreneur. It's the principles of the entrepreneur who are doing that, and the principles of the entrepreneur are only in the area of sales. That means a real entrepreneur has a bigger audience, has a bigger focus. the entrepreneur is having a lot more things on his plate, because he has to think about on the marketing side, he has to think about on the HR side for his company, he has to think about on the finance side, as you correctly said, he has to have, okay, I have to, and if I want to grow, I need liquidity, I need to go to the venture. So for that reason, I created a term, and I'm happy that a lot of people picked that up, and I call that salespreneurs, sales entrepreneurs.
Yep.
Why? Because the salespreneur has the principles of the entrepreneur correctly, but he's applying it only to his profession, to sales. And this is what we are creating right now. We are saying, what are the ingredients? What are the things that a salespreneur need to learn from the entrepreneur? Because for a salespreneur, he has not to think about how the company has to be financed. Yeah, his job is really to get new business and to take care for accounts, contact management, and account management, whatever it is. And so I think here kicks in, what kind of principles are universal? What kind of principles you can apply for everyone around the world? Because if it's only applying, let's say, where we both live in California, come on, then maybe in Texas the guy would say, or in Europe they would say, forget it. Yeah. So there must be universal principles, and I 100% believe that they are there and they are already laid out. I was even writing an ebook about that. Maybe if the guys want one day to look at that, and I called it The Principles of Entrepreneurs, How Precise Economic Philosophy Empowers Sales. And there are 7 principles in there from the Austrian School of Economics, because they really did that. And they really brought it into the existence. And I strongly believe what you said so correctly is the best sales performer have learned that, they see that, and they act exactly in the same mindset, consciousness, I would say, in the same consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what you do is, I think you see the best salespeople maybe not mirroring the same skills that an entrepreneur has, but mirroring the same principles in things around learning, around execution, around you start seeing some things. I mean, the world of sales has changed, and the complexity of sales, at least in B2B sales, has changed enormously. And so that says we have a whole new skill set that we have to develop as salespreneurs. You know, and that starts bridging into some of the entrepreneurial skill sets. I mean, you start seeing the professional salesperson starts becoming much more of a resource manager. You know, it used to be that I went out to do the deal, but now, you know, I can't, if I work for a large organization that has a large product line, I can't possibly be expert enough in all those products to bring the value to the customer. So I have to orchestrate the right resources in, whether it's product management in our organization, whether it's marketing, whether it might be a partner to bring in. So now as a sales professional or a salespreneur, I have to start broadening the toolkit I leverage. I have to start looking at things like resource management. I have to start looking at things like project management. If you look at the sales process or the buying process, what they are is they're really specialized cases of project management, specialized applications of project management. So if I'm really trying to align with the customer in their buying process, you know, I have to have a project management kind of focus and a project management type of skill to say, you know, what are some of the things that we're seeing, you know, what are our goals and milestones as we work with the customer to move them through the buying process, and how do we execute those goals and milestones, and how do we do that collaboratively? So now I bring in another skill, which again we see in very, very strong entrepreneurs, which is collaboration. How do I get people to work together effectively, leveraging, you know, getting the best out of each person? So what we see is kind of almost a convergence. It's a distant convergence path, but almost a convergence path that says You know, I'm writing a post right now on this, that if I look at all our traditional sales training, you know, whether it's solution sales, consultative sales, customer-focused sales, even insight-driven or challenger-driven sales, those have all become table stakes. You know, to even get to be invited to play in the game, you have to be a master of those skills. But now the salespreneur, the salesperson of today and tomorrow, has to enrich those skills with, you know, rich business management, business acumen, collaboration, project management, resource management, and those kinds of things. And so you start seeing the skills that you see exhibited in very good business people, general managers, and very good salespreneurs. You start seeing entrepreneurs. You start seeing similar kinds of skills, again, focused in a specific application of those skills, you know, by great salespeople.
Absolutely. Yeah. So would you say this is the difference between traditional salespeople? This is actually our question 2 we're going into. The main characteristics, the difference between a traditional salespeople, as we currently view them, and a salespreneur?
Well, I would like to follow up a little bit what Dave started right now with that. I would just go one step back and go one step deeper in that area. Let's take, if you want to be a doctor one day, okay? And you're in high school, yeah, and you are sitting there and you say, I want to go in medicine. I want to study medicine, okay? Maybe some of the guys have already in mind they want to be a radiologist or a dentist, whatever. Yeah, they have some. I want to be a dermatologist or whatever. But mostly they don't. They want to study medicine. Why they want to do that? It comes out of intrinsic something, mostly. Let's say, well, not everyone, but mostly it comes of the intrinsic to do something good for medicine. I want to help people. I want to, this is a good profession, I can earn a lot of money, but also I want to help something. This is why you start to go for medicine, correct? Mm-hmm. And then it starts when you go to medicine, you are studying for a lot of years at the university. My goodness, we know it's not easy, like these books, yeah? And can you imagine you would go to a heart surgery and the guy was only in the 2nd year of his study, yeah? And this is, if you make the connection to a company, yeah, sometimes we hire people and salespeople are operating on the heart of others, anyhow. So it takes a while before you become a doctor. And then kicks in that the whole specification starts in radiology, in dermatology, and whatever it is, yeah? So in all the different segments that we have, and I think today we have, I don't know, it's almost 100 and more, yeah, where you can be in a different specific area. I basically see that similar to sales. The only thing is, what is the first? What is the starting point? I believe the starting point for a salesperson is deep inside, is besides making a cool job. Like yesterday was a guy I was interviewing, and he said to me he was a chemistry. And he was studying chemistry, and then he was working for a company, and his friends with 22 and 21 were already gaining a lot of money, and he said, gosh, what I'm doing. So his motivation was a little bit on this side, but then he came in and said, okay, what's really interesting is, and this is the motive, is salespeople think very altruistic. Why? Because they know immediately if they create a network, each one person can help. So what for a medicine student is more or less the motivation to help others, salespeople have an altruistic or very altruistic approach to life because they know exactly what it is. The only difference right now that kicks in is for a medicine or to become a doctor, there is a clear path of education. You have to go to the university, you have to learn all this, then you specialize, and we have nothing on the education side. You have not even really education in a good sense, and it gets more and more complex, as you correctly said, because you brought even a new thing in, like collaboration and project management. Come on, project management is a profession in itself. If you do that correctly, you have really, you have to have good skills. And for collaboration, for a good collaboration, the most important thing what you need to know is how to communicate.
Yep.
If you cannot communicate, it's really hard to collaborate, yeah? And it's not only typing. So the medicine students or the law students and all the other professions have a clear path of learning. General, speaking about the first profession, and then go in the specialized area. We have right now inside, outside sales, field sales, whatever. There's hundreds of sales. We are always talking about these different end products, if you want to say, about what comes after the general learning. But we have no general learning. There's nothing there. The people mostly jumping a lot, as you correctly said, from high school, college, university, immediately in a sales job, but they have never trained anything. They have never learned the basics. And so this is why every company is looking, when I'm speaking with other owners, how many good salespeople you really have. Then it kicks in the 80-20. Yeah.
Yeah, Nicholas, you cover a whole bunch of issues here. I mean, I think, and again, I think that, I think it's called the Sales Education Foundation, but I think the research that they have is there's something like fewer than 70 or so colleges or universities in the U.S. that offer either an undergraduate or a graduate specialization in sales. So, there's something about, if you look at all the business schools and all the business curriculums, why sales, marketing is very well represented in those, but sales is very underrepresented in those. So I think the basic, finding a way for, and this is something that corporations and organizations need to push back on the universities to say, you need to start training people and giving them basic skills and those things. Correct. But I think as you move on, here's where I may come out kind of a slightly contrarian view to yours is in terms of sales as a profession. If you look at, we always tend to focus on the doctors who have to be trained and have to be certified, lawyers who have to be trained and certified, accountants and so on, those professions where there's a formal certification process. But there isn't a profession of VPs of manufacturing. There isn't a profession of CEOs. There is a profession really of CFOs because you have to be or at least have somebody who's a certified public accountant in the organization. But as you look across other organizational functions, there isn't the profession so much. And also, I don't feel real strongly about the certification or professionalization in the sense that I get. I have to pass a test like a lawyer does and become a member of the bar. I have to pass a test like a doctor does or so on and continue to be recertified. But I do think that what we look at is professionalism in the more generic sense is you look at what makes a top performing professional in each one of those. And there are certain things around learning, around continuous improvement, around mastery of what their profession is, that any successful high performer, whether they're a manufacturing person, whether they're a design development person, whatever, if they want to get to the top of their chosen field, there's certain common principles. I think, when I start looking at salespeople, what I look at is some of it is their hunger. I look at their curiosity. I look at their drive for solving problems because that's what we do. I'm not sure I was altruistic when I became a salesperson, but I was intensely curious. I was, I saw these customers, again, I had this great charter. It's your God-given mission to get 100% share of account and you figure it out. So I was curious. I wandered around. I talked to a lot of people. I found people with problems. I said, gee, this is really cool. How can I help them solve the problem? And a lot of times these days, and this is probably, I get back into my role of qualification. I get people calling me all the time with problems that they want me to consider solving, and I know the problems that I solve very, very well. And if their problem doesn't fit in the problems I solve very well, then I say, thank you for sharing. I can't help you. Here's possibly somebody that could. And I think that's something that companies have challenges with and that salespeople have challenges with. We don't know what problems we're the best in the world at solving, and we don't know who the customers are that have those problems. If our companies can help us answer those questions and point salespeople in that direction that says, here are the problems we're the best in the world at solving, here are the customers that have them, go out and conquer them.
Yeah, no, I like that we have different kinds of views on one of these topics, because you see, none of us has the whole, or I was really insight how we can solve some problems. We need for that the collaboration and to talk about how we can really make the next move and going deeper with that area. But as we see is to attract young people. And I think this is the important part, how we can attract in the future young people more to raise their hands and say, this is a very nice profession that I want to solve problems. And for that reason, it needs education. What kind of form of education it needs? I'm not in the education business. I'm also not so a fan of big certificates and stuff like that. I am more in the area that you have to reflect, to learn, and then practice immediately. And then you see if that what you have learned you can apply in a real life situation. How this is, well, there's new concepts out there. But what we are seeing, hopefully agree to that, is we need more education in the sales area, because when someone comes to your company and says, I want to be a salesperson today, he needs a lot of training. It's so complex. It's getting more and more complex than any time before, because the customer, as we know, the buyer, has dramatically changed. The buyer is even demanding from the sales rep, from the seller, that he knows everything. You see, come on, you need a lot of insight. You have to, first of all, to understand how the buyer is talking with you.
Right. So absolutely. Let me just interrupt there for a second.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nikki. This is question 3. We're just moving into with your exact thing you're talking about in there. So if you want to continue, that's fantastic. The buyer journey has changed. How does business need to adopt to be successful? Well, I just think it's exactly on topic for what you're talking about.
Thanks, Richard. It's good. I think this is exactly, the buyer dramatically has changed, and it will change even more, because the buyer is getting more and more educated. He's going out there. We know that, so we don't have to talk about that. This is common sense already. Yeah? The thing is, the seller hasn't changed, and now it kicks in when you speak to a buyer. When we have a buyer communication, and you interpret the question of the buyer incorrectly, you're on a wrong path. For that reason, you need insight in the communication skills. What is the buyer really asking? Because sometimes you see in a conversation you ask a question, but you ask a different question besides. You have to understand that. But the people are not trained for that. So what we say is we need this training for communication, for collaboration, for project management correctly, for the insight. And I think the complexity gets more and more. And John Golden and I were coming up with a concept, and we are in the process writing a book. Hopefully we can manage it, that will be out there this year, and I want to show this, if I can handle that, how to do this. Here we go, and I want to show that, and let's see, one moment. It's the toolbox, and then it says share screen.
While you're bringing that up, I thought I'd kind of add on to that a little bit. I think First, let me address kind of the role of the salesperson, but then I want to go back to the buyer journey and how the buyer has changed, because I think there's some real profound things that if we aren't sensitive to, we miss. But you know, okay, go ahead, Nicholas.
Okay, so this is so I want to explain it a little bit. The working title we have right now is network selling. So on the right hand, you have the buyer, and on the left side, you have, as you see, the seller. And what we strongly believe today is that the seller, who is really having, first of all, first point, a self-awareness. Come on, self-awareness is not coming overnight. There are some young people, they have that, but you see it's a learning process to be really self-aware. The next is to be confident in what you do. It takes time. Yeah, it's coming overnight, and we need some learning experiences where people can learn. Because you learn, I created there something saying a failure is an invitation to start again. Confidence comes how often you stand up and do it again and again. So we need to create this form of reflecting and learning. Then the business acumen. Oh, come on. In each industry, this could be very complex. And then value-oriented, to create a value for the buyer. And here you see that when we are creating this network selling in the future, people need to be trained how to do that. Because the buyer wants not only, first of all, a good buy, that means a win-win or a fair deal. Yeah, this is something you have to learn. You have to create a form of trust, because everything in life comes at the end of trust. Otherwise, he will not respect you. Yeah. And he has to show some empathy in that area. Otherwise, when you're not relating to the people on the other end, it will be very hard. And the business solution is then what you sell at the end of the day, so that the buyer saying, well, that makes sense, this was a good sell, and everything should be in a form, I would say not cool, it should be enjoyable. It should be a nice area, because who wants to have a sale where it's miserable, the whole experience? You want to have a good experience. And when the buyer agrees to that at the end of the day, what he's doing in a network community, he gives you a referral. And this is what it's all about. Because how many sales situations in yourself, Dave, you have experienced, when there is a good one, what you do? You have friends and you say, well, this guy was a good guy. If you want to buy a house, this guy, Dave is a very cool guy. You go to Dave because he was very fair. He helped me. He was doing all of that. We had a great experience. Call him. I will recommend him. You see, in a network society, this is even much better. But you see, for all of that, what we see here, it needs education. It needs education, and this is not coming overnight.
Yeah.
Right, let's just jump back to David. And
yeah, let me jump back and kind of piggyback off what you just said, Nicholas. I mean, I think if I look back, I started selling for IBM in the very, very early 80s. And the role of one of the roles of the salesperson at that point in time was really educating the customer about solutions, educating customers about products, and so on and so forth. Well, fast forward to today, we know that people are researching it themselves on the web and being educated through great websites, great content, and so on, a lot about products and solutions. So the role of the salesperson is transformed. If all we can do is continue to say the same thing over and over, we aren't creating any value for the customer. They've already learned that stuff. So the role of the salesperson now has changed to educating them about their business, about opportunities that they face with their companies, in their markets, and so on, and how maybe to do things better. And the reason that's so important, if you go back to the buyer journey, and if you really kind of understand the plight of the buyer, is companies have gotten so lean, they've gotten so skinny that everybody at all levels just has too much on their plates. In some sense, everybody, all of our customers are spending so much time fighting the alligators that they forget that there's a swamp that's filling up and that they have to do something about it. And so if you look at how our customers and how buyers live their lives every day, in some sense, and I may be overstating it a little bit, in some sense, it's just surviving. It's getting from today to tomorrow to the next day. And they don't have a chance to step back and say, what opportunities am I missing? Are there better ways to do things? Are there different ways to do things? What changes are happening in the marketplace? What are my competitors doing that may be threatening to me, or what emerging competitors that are, out of left field that I don't even recognize are doing things? So the role of the salesperson really becomes that person that can come in and interrupt the person and say, I know you're busy, I know you're consumed with fighting alligators, but you're going to drown pretty soon.
Well, yeah. But at the end of the day, everything what we have to create is a value. And when we're creating a value, the customer is feeling it or he doesn't feel it. Yeah, because when you create a value, as long as you don't say this was a value for me, I can speak about values 100 times. If you don't feel it, if you don't experience it, it's not a value. Yeah, and you see the situation in our industries are so diverse. If I go in my industry, in the SaaS business, in CRM industry, right now one of the big topics what I see in the whole cloud business around the world is it's all exchangeable. I give you an example. If we would do right now the same thing, no, it's very easy. It's very easy, and you will immediately apply to that, and probably wholeheartedly agree with me. If we would not do this over Google Hangouts, if we would do that, let's say, over a different kind of technology, and we would say GoToMeeting could do the same, or GoToWebinar could do the same, and we just would use the same system from another vendor, nobody cares. Right now in our industry, we have in the cloud business in the US, as you know, and around the world, it's more and more rocking everywhere. We have thousands of cloud services. So the company in itself and the sales process in itself is changing for these guys because everything is very exchangeable. You can change it. Very easy. If it doesn't fit next year, I am renting it, I change it. What kind of bondage, what kind of value I have to this kind of companies when I'm a salesperson to create? Because I'm competing in a very different area. So we have on the one hand the complex sales situation where it's getting what you said correctly, and I with you 100% agree, where it's getting more on the area of the solution, that we have to dive in and see the opportunity for the customer, for the buyer, and to mark him the opportunities. But then there's a lot of sales situation where you just are in a very different situation where you just even similar like to a supermarket where you go right now and you are just choosing what kind of drinks I'm taking. So there's so different things going on today, and I basically believe when we speak about sales and salespreneurs and what is changing, the most important part here is always the consciousness and the mindset first. And then there is the professions they are building up there. In each industry, it could be the applying of that is very different. And at the end of the day, we know because the buyer is so well educated today, the seller has a problem to come across very good, authentic, with empathy, and with insight to the buyer to bring this value that the buyer says, well, this is not only a nice guy, he's representing a good brand, he's representing a good product, a good solution, but he's also representing a bondage for me that I can rely on, that I can stick to that. And then it kicks in some areas what we all want. I guess you also were flying a lot around in your life already, yeah? And all of us, when we fly, who wants to be downgraded? I have never found a person who was once flying first class or business class overseas and then say, oh, I'm happy to downgrade to economy. Come on. No one is doing that, correct? No one is doing that. So why? Well, what is the difference? It's the service. It's the service that you experience. So the thing is, at the end of the day, that all what you do in the sales has to be in line with the service that the buyer is experiencing at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think clearly, I mean, what it does in terms of skills that salespeople need to have, I think they've always need to have it, but I think we need to be sharper at it right now is kind of the nimbleness and adaptability. We have to meet the customer where they're at in their process.
Correct.
Sometimes we need, and we have to take the customer to a different point in their process, and sometimes that may be taking them backwards. Mm-hmm. That may be saying, gee, you may not be looking at this problem quite correctly. You may want to reconsider and looking at it. But first, we have to be nimble and adaptable to start with where they're at. You know,
that
so
needs boldness. That needs boldness and honesty. What you say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so what it happens, I mean, we can't go in, everybody's all lathered up about insight selling and challenger and all that right now. We can't go in and do our challenger pitch if the buyer is already some way, they've challenged themselves, they've recognized that they need to change, and they're down that path. You know, we look like fools. So nimbleness and adaptability, I mean, bridging this back to the entrepreneurial and the salespreneur stuff, I'm on the boards of several startups, and the term pivot has become very, very key in high-tech startups, and all. We start with it down a certain path, and we recognize, we're not quite there, and we pivot. Salespeople have to be that adaptable and learn how to pivot, based on where they're at and what they need to do to move forward with the customer and accomplish their shared objectives.
Absolutely. And that brings us nicely into question 4. Thank you very much. Which is, how can the principles of entrepreneurs help salespeople? Because that sounds exactly on target, what you're talking about with startups and that entrepreneurial approach where they sometimes have to pivot, that sort of principle and skills. How does that translate through to salespeople?
Well,
Nikolaus?
I give you one principle from the Austrian School of Economics that everybody can relate to that immediately. Ludwig von Mises, really a long time ago, was saying value is not intrinsic, it is not in things, it is within us. It is the way in which man reacts to the conditions of its environment. So what that means in a real situation, you see, a subjective value, this is what the Austrians call that. A subjective value is if you are having a value that only the salesperson is really seeing because he creates the solution in his head, because he brings something together, and this is subjective, yeah? He brings that all together for the buyer. For that reason, to put data in a system can never replace a good salesperson. The fear years ago, when salespeople had fears, I put all my contact data and every information in the system. Forget. You can never be replaced if you create a real value to the customer. And when you create this real value, this principle, when you apply these principles, they are universal. In your life, in your sales situation, you are so a value, not only for the company, even more for the buyer. Because the buyer knows, my goodness, this guy comes up with great ideas that I haven't seen, that I was not aware. I bring this together, and he helps me in the business. And then we have a sustainable, I would say, also relationship. Yeah? And this is what we're all looking for, because let's be honest, who wants to replace always vendors? No one wants to do that. This is a lot of work. So. Yeah, so when you come in and you create this form of really a value that the seller brings to the table, then I immediately are creating something that the buyer can relate to that. And so there's a lot of principles out there And this is what an entrepreneur is really doing, because the entrepreneur is seeing that on a big screen. He's saying, is there any new solution for a problem out there in the world? Okay, he's seeing that on maybe on a scalable, if he wants to do that, on a scalable business level, and then he has to create that and bringing that in the product. The seller in that self, in his world, in a smaller sense, has to create the same principle for the buyer with the same principle. It's the same mechanism, and it's the same spirit, because he creates the same thing.
Okay, so if we're looking at that, sorry, David, if we're going to take that, you're the CEO of an organization, and you want to encourage salespreneurs in this entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is a great thing. And this question will go to David to begin with, and then to yourself, Nicholas. How are you going to encourage an entrepreneurial spirit within your sales team? Because it doesn't suit everybody. Not everybody wants to be entrepreneurial. So how would you encourage that mindset within your team?
Well, I think first, I mean, the whole organization has to have kind of this entrepreneurial mindset and have this trust in the salespeople. You know, if I look back to the way I started at sales, which was they created this dream and this vision that you know, I could dream about getting 100% share of customer or 100% share of my territory or marketplace. You know, how realistic that was, you know, could I really achieve that? But they created this dream and vision, and they empowered me to do this and held me accountable. Said, you have to figure it out. And what they did is they provided me all sorts of resources and all sorts of tools. They trained me like crazy. You know, they provided systems and tools and support, everything to make me successful. But it was all, you know, Dave, this is for you. Now you've got to take this and go out and figure out what to do with it to achieve that goal. So I think first is one, creating that kind of empowerment, creating that vision, and say you are the president of your own company, and your company happens to be this territory. It may be a selection of accounts, it may be a selection of a geographic kind of thing, it may be an industry vertical. Dave, you're going to call on all the hospitals in Southern California or something like that. But, you know, first they say, this is your business, and your goal is to grow that business as much as possible, to create as much revenue, to create as much profitability, to have dominant market share. You know, so you create that as that kind of empowerment, and then too, you hold them accountable for it. You know, what's your business plan to do this? You know, as entrepreneurs, we achieve business plans as we go to get funding or as we go to our boards. We make a commitment. This is what I'm going to do in terms of producing revenue, profitability, blah, blah, blah. You know, so likewise, the salespeople have to come and present their business plans to us, and then we have to, as companies, provide them the resources and support to execute that business plan. So I think you know, it's this kind of shared thing of one, creating the vision, giving the empowerment, but then closely tied to that is that accountability.
Yeah. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's again just underlining it's the form of our empowerment and then our responsibility. You have to have the responsibility, and for that you need also, this is the next problem that we are running in the future, is because we made a wrong decision in the past. We made our best salespeople the sales manager without any training. We have a lack of sales management because we are just speaking right now of the sales reps. We can at this time, and this goes right far beyond everything what we can do in the next couple of minutes about speaking sales manager problems. But you are because the accountability, the responsibility, I want to help him is it's sales manager's job then to go and help him. Yeah, and this is rapidly also changing. Yeah, this is a big move.
It's absolutely unacceptable for the sales manager to say, good luck and Godspeed. I've given you this territory. I've given you all these resources. Good luck and Godspeed. And unfortunately, too often we do that. And particularly we do that in channels. But when Nicholas, I don't know what you did in going around getting when you were founding the company to go around and get investors and so on. But I guarantee you, no investor said, "Here, take my money. Good luck and Godspeed."
No.
And so we have to be, that accountability and managers making sure that, one, people feel empowered, but two, knowing that there's an accountability. This isn't just something where, we're a charitable organization and we're wishing you the best. We're holding you responsible for this, because if your business as a salesperson is successful, then my business as a sales manager, which is the collection of all my team's businesses, is successful, and then our overall company is successful. We also have to harness that too. You can't just go off and do what you want to do. You have to say, salespeople are the tip of the spear, or the execution arm of the company's business strategy. So the things that they're going out to do, the entrepreneurial things they're going out to do in the territory, have to be consistent with the overall business strategy and who we are as a company, how we want to be perceived, and how we're going to grow our business.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're on the same page for sure. For that, everything in life needs focus.
Absolutely.
Focus is and this is this is why we basically, I can say, created our pipeliner. This was their originally idea, to help salespeople to be focused on what? On the target. Because as you said, the target, the quota, or however we call it, I like more the target, because you see the quota is something different. Yeah? But the target, to reach the goal, to go together as a team, if you have that constantly in front of you every day, in and out, it subconsciously is doing something with you. And I think the more you focus in your life on one thing, you will be successful. The most people are just going over astray. And for the sales rep, as you say, his goal is run your business, and I help you to run the business. I'm coming in and help you, to support you, to educate you, to train you, to equip you. Sometimes equipping is very much important. It depends on the industry. Yeah? And helping to focus, and then come along and say, you are doing good in your business. Here, it's not that I take it away. I give you the entrepreneurial approach and give you the reward. I think the reward is often not there. Yeah, we have a wrong concept of rewarding sometimes too. Yeah? Well, we're in a big change. I love it, because you see, everything right now in the world is changing, and so this is the buyer right now has changed the industry. And now the seller has to change, and we're all moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Right, okay, we've got time for one quick question, as we've only got 2 minutes left. So that question will be, what kind of tools do salespreneurs teams need to achieve their goals more effectively? So what tools would you give or present or use as a salespreneur to help you to achieve your goals? And Nikki, I think I might know your answer. So we'll start.
I'm handing that over to Dave, because
Well, clearly, first you need an outstanding CRM system like Pipeliner to really kind of help you focus yourself and organize yourself.
You're very
and so
kind.
on.
You're very kind.
So that's not even a paid endorsement, but clearly, it does start with that. And I'll start. So much of the time we're looking at technology and those things as tools, but I think first kind of tools are a sales process, and a sales process that you use, and a sales process that's aligned with how you guide the customer through their buying process. Without the sales process is basically the cornerstone to everything I do, from a deal strategy point of view, for everything that I do from a pipeline in meeting my goals or my target or quota, whatever words we want to use, but making sure I'm generating the business, out of my entrepreneurial business or out of my territory that my shareholders expect, and my shareholders are my manager and my company. You know, so I have to, you know, I have to start with that as a tool. Then there's a lot of technology that facilitates us in doing special things. You know, clearly CRM system and something as really great as Pipeliner is kind of a real complement to helping you do that much more efficiently and much more effectively than you can ever do. I mean, I can't imagine running our business today without, you know, strong CRM tools. You know, and then there are also sort of specialized tools on top of that that may help you. And there's, you know, Nicholas talked a little bit about this. There's kind of the amplification of sales and marketing. I go kind of hot and cold on that, but there's any kind of apps that you can get that really help you with specialized parts of that.
Yeah, I think from the technology point of view, I agree with Dave what he says. First of all, it needs the underlying concept, and the concept is not in the technology. Yeah, the technology is just representing, and it should represent easy, smart, and we have an approach and we visualize, because we say salespeople visualize, and visualization is easy because it's a universal communication. Yeah. But today, this is the cool thing, we are gathering a lot of different kinds of our technology out there. They are really helpful. Like what we do now, we can communicate, we can use a new form of communication. We have in our company already, I think, almost 50 different SaaS solutions that we are working with each other. It's amazing. Yeah, for everything, we are trying to adopt the best solutions that are out there, finding the best and using it, and because it helps you. And the good thing is, where the industry is heading, you don't have any longer the headache of buying a new hardware, running the sys administrator who has all the passwords and he's not giving it away.
But clearly great tools like this, like a Google Hangout, they're absolutely worthless unless you have something meaningful and impactful to say.
Sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's about content, has to bash it up, and it's about the approach, which ultimately I think is the human skills, and it's the tools which just enable you to do that perhaps more efficiently, and they can bring insights to the table. So, for example, sales coaching is something I like to talk about, and tools can help you to point you where you should be coaching people. You should understand what coaching is to begin with, though, and how to actually coach people, but the tool can just help you to do this. Now, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. It is just gone the hour, so thank you very much for joining me. That was a fantastic debate, and thank you very much for your input. Thank you, David. You've been a superb guest. If you'd like to check out David's blog, his Twitter handle is @DavidABrock, and the website is partnersinexcellenceblog.com. And of course, we have Nikolaus Kimla as well. Nikolaus is our CEO of Pipeliner CRM at Pipeliner CRM. If you do have any questions, I'm sure both of you would be happy to take questions on Twitter after the event.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the invitation.
Thanks a lot for this morning.
Thank you.
Greetings. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.